welcome back to L.A.M.E Book Club Podcast. My name is Melissa.
I'm Ellie.
And we are back with another episode of Hot Goss with a little unpopular sauce. And I am very excited for today's because we are going to be diving into four different characters from across all three of SJM's book series and asking the question, are these characters really dead? Maybe.
Hot takes.
Maybe not. So
I think we maybe should mention here, though, that if you have not read all 15, I'm not even going to just say, like, you should have done Kingdom of Ash and all that. No, all 15 books.
Yeah.
Maybe this is not the episode for you, but please join us on Wednesdays as we walk through Throne of Glass together. And, once you've read all 15, come back.
Perfect. I'm going to say something, too, but I'm glad you did, just in case I forgot. So, the four people we are going to be talking about today are Asterin, Kaltain, Cormac, and Ianthe. So, buckle up. I know. Buckle up, Buttercup. And let's just jump right in. Ellie, are you ready?
I am.
All right. So let's
I'm really
start
excited.
with Asterin.
Wait. I said I'm ready, but I'm really excited because Melissa wrote a bunch of these out and said that she's not going to tell me until we're actually on the podcast. So you are getting my live and raw reactions to all of this news at once, the same as you.
Exactly. Cool. So we thought that we could set this up kind of as like a let's talk both sides, like why we think this is true, why we don't think this is true, and either convince ourselves that we like agree with it, and or if we think that we do, maybe convince ourselves why it's not true, they actually are dead, whatever.
Basically
so
playing
hard.
both sides of the field. We're gonna talk ourselves all the way in and then talk ourselves all the way out, just so that we're not committing. Very, very, what is it, Sweden or Switzerland? Very Switzerland of us.
It's Switzerland, yes.
Yeah,
except,
very neutral.
I'm going to caveat that right now. That's probably not going to happen for me. I'm going to do my best. But I have some pretty strong opinions on three of these at least.
Okay.
And one of them is, we'll jump right in with Asterin. Do I think that she is alive still? No, I do not. That's my stand, and I don't think anyone's able to convince me of that. But let's talk about the theories that I've heard and why people think that she could be alive. So there's this theory online. Ellie, I think you wrote down the name of the account, right? I did not write down the name account. I want to give credit.
Is it the reel that you sent me? Because that comes from Days in the Books.
Okay, so account on Instagram, Days in the Books, saw this theory that basically said that this person thinks when in Kingdom of Ash, when Asterin took the yielding at the end with the rest of the 13, she was able to escape through a rip in the worlds and ended up in Prythian being reborn as Morrigan.
Oh.
So I personally don't. I nothing against like anyone who might agree with this. I just I just think that there's no convincing me that actually happened. However, here are some of the points. We've talked about this in a previous Hot Goss episode. I do think that Mor is a witch, but I don't think she's a specific witch. I don't think she's Asterin either reborn or reincarnated or whatever. This also, to me, part of the reason why I don't think this is true is it would make the sacrificial death of the 13 like so much less impactful, I think. Like what they did for Manon and what they did for everyone was like got me. I was sobbing reading this part in the series.
No, and I totally agree.
Like while I didn't want them to die, because they did, like it made it such a beautiful like ending in a way. And I think to find out if Sarah was just like, just kidding, she's actually not dead, it'd be like, yeah, it would taint the ending of Throne of Glass for me, the series.
Yeah.
Also, again, operating on the concept that they're Throne of Glass, ACOTAR, and Crescent City are all 3 separate worlds happening at the exact same time. This doesn't make any sense because Moore is like 500 in ACOTAR, and Asterin, it can't be more than like 150. Like, she's maybe a little bit over 100. I can't remember exactly how old she is, but she is definitely not that old. Yeah. So if these worlds are all happening at the same time...
Tying back to the death not being as impactful, we also get Asterin's backstory in Kingdom of Ash, or maybe an earlier book, where you just, she found peace in death. I would like to believe, where she's with her family, her baby, and the man in the cabin, and then to be like, actually, never mind. Now she's also in the night court where her father sucks and being tortured by Eris. All that, yikes!
Yeah,
don't love that.
Exactly. I'm glad you brought that up because that was my next point too. Like, I think everyone found solace in the fact that, okay, she died and that sucked, but not only, like I mentioned, was her death impactful for everyone still living, but then, like you said, like, she found that peace. She was finally reunited with the baby she never got to meet and the man that she never got to spend time with. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I don't know. Also, I think, like, again, with Moore being, I am convinced she's a witch, but with that, this would mean that she would be part of the Iron Teeth clan, and I think she's going to be Kraken, like, when it's confirmed, because how much of a statement that red. She's always in red. Red is, like, her color, and that's a Kraken thing. That's not Iron Teeth. So yeah, hello Red. That's all I'm gonna say about that one. Another part of this theory mentions that Moore is secretly creating her own army and will kill her dad to become the High Lady of the Court of Nightmares. I like don't understand the thought process at all. Exactly. This doesn't make sense because the Court of Nightmares is actually the Hewn City, aka not a real court, and it falls under the Night Court, which already has a High Lady and a High Lord. Phazan. Like, also her dad, even let's pretend that there wasn't already a High Lady and a High Lord, High Lord. Her dad's not the High Lord, so killing him wouldn't then automatically make her High Lord. Mm-hmm. So I don't, like, where would that title come from just because she killed her dad? Like, I don't understand that. I could maybe see her creating a secret army, and I will say the theory that I saw, it doesn't necessarily specifically say that Moore is doing, like, creating a secret army in, like, a vindictive or malicious way. That's just kind of the way I understood it, like, reading through the theory. But if that ends up being true, where she is creating some army, I feel like it's going to be not in the theme of betrayal that Sarah has talked about isn't going to come from Moore. If she is creating this army, it's going to be some kind of, like, come in clutch and save everyone at the end of the day with a grand reveal kind of way, not I just killed my dad and I have a secret army and now I'm trying to become High Lady of the Night Court kind of thing, which is what I interpreted from this theory. So, I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that, Ellie?
No. You pretty much said everything I was going to say. I will add in, though, that the original person who posted this theory completely said it's unhinged and would not make any sense, but it would be fun. So no hate to them. Yeah. I'm like, this theory sucks. It's not going to work. She's doing exactly what we do. It's just fun. Exactly. It's just a fun thing to think about. Fun. But
it is fun to think about.
I do agree that this one I do not think would work, specifically because of just the powerful story behind Asterin and how, like, her ending really sealed the deal of, self-sacrifice, and then more the color, everything you said. It just doesn't work, but it's fun. It's fun to think about.
It is fun. So I'm going to say on this one, smash or pass, I'm passing.
Smash or pass.
All right. Moving on to Kaltain. And this one I am so excited to talk about because honestly, I am 50-50 on this. And I'm even going to say, going into this, I was not. I thought I was super against it.
I'm going to throw out there, I am 100% not on board with this. I like the idea. I think it's really fun and could be really deep and cool, but I'm 100% against it. So if you change my mind, I will gasp out loud.
Okay. Well, we'll see. I'm curious to see if I will. I will tell you where I land because I do lean one way. I'll tell you where I land at the end, but I just want you and everyone else to know that I went into like coming up with like writing this out being like, everyone thinks this is going to happen, here's why I don't, and I ended up completely changing how I was doing this because I started seeing more and more things that I'm like, well, actually, is this all a coincidence? Like, this actually makes so much sense, kind of. So all right, with that, I saw, I'm sure lots of people have seen at this point, a theory talking about how Kaltain might be the Suriel. The reason behind this theory is almost like there's like two really big, I guess just one actually, piece of quote unquote proof that people use. And it's the quote that Kaltain says right before sacrificing herself in the end of Queen of Shadows, where she says, and tell her to promise me to punish them all. When she asks why, tell her I said that they would not let me bring the cloak she gave me, but I kept a piece of it to remember that promise she made, to remember to repay her for a warm cloak in a cold dungeon. She's talking to Elide in Manon about Selena in this line. So everyone says like, oh, the cloak, the Suriel likes a cloak, Kaltain talks about a cloak, and I will say it is kind of an interesting and unique thing for Sarah to connect both these characters with, like a cloak, the weird connection to them that they both have, but I don't know if it's enough. Well, let's just talk about if it's enough too. So here are some coincidences. Obviously the cloak thing, we just talked about that. However, I actually think that might not be the most convincing of this, even though some people think there is. There is a theme of, quote, like, leave the world a better place than you found it in Throne of Glass series, which is also the very last thing that the Suriel said to Feyre before it died. So kind of, that's like, Kaltain believed in Selena. That was kind of Selena Aelin. That was like her whole thing, kind of. And it would be it wouldn't be unheard of for her to then, if she did become the Suriel, take that into her next life and kind of use that as her theme then as well. In Kingdom of Ash, before heading to Morath, Dorian was trying to summon Gavin using Damaris, which we all know is the Sword of Truth. However, one of these times he got Kaltain instead, and he didn't know why it was Kaltain and not Gavin. It is interesting to me that this truth sword summoned her, and the Suriel is also a creature who is bound to answer truthfully by anyone who captures them.
Ooh.
So that is,
point,
again...
That point pushed me a little in the right direction.
All right, well, so also in that same conversation, when talking to Kaltain, Dorian asks where she is and she says that she can't tell him where she is, who is there with her, or who is stopping her from telling him this. She specifically says, quote, there are forces at work beyond what is tangible and what is known. She also tells him in this conversation that she knows who Aelin is, and because she died before realizing, or before anyone confirmed that Aelin was Selena. And when he questions her on how she knows this, she says, quote, death has its advantages. Could this be implying that she can see things, or that she now has some sort of ability to just know things that she shouldn't? And that is also kind of like part of the Suriel's whole thing, knowing things in addition to telling the truth. Like you just ask them for information and they know lots of it. It's loose, but I'm just stacking up a lot of similarities and connections.
If she says, quote, death has its advantages, then we have to believe that she is dead. The Suriel is not dead because we know later on it actually dies. So that's kind of like, I don't know.
Well, yes. However, I'm going to get to that in a second too. One could assume that she's not fully. I was about to get to here next. One could assume that she's actually not fully dead or alive. I don't think there's enough evidence because she straight up says death has its advantages, but it could also be like a bone quarter situation in Crescent City 3. That's what a lot of people think. So it's like she died, but she's still aware and like still in a place it's not like
that's true
where they die again and then go somewhere else.
The Bone
Connor.
Bone King.
Oh
no,
the Underking.
Yeah, the Underking. He was dead, but then they killed him.
Exactly.
So that makes sense.
So yeah, I can't remember if I actually meant to write that down and I didn't, so I'm glad I brought it up because that was part of the whole like death.
Oh, I just
like
said?
She says no. Yes, but what I said too about like it being like the bone quarter. Anyways, that could be a way to explain how she says death has its advantages, but then at the same time didn't really like die. Yeah, I don't know. All right, another thing, the Suriel bleeds black. We do know this. And while it's easy to assume Kaltain didn't bleed black as a human, she did have a word key in her arm before she sacrificed herself, and it would make sense if that changed her biologically.
Ooh. That makes sense.
Again, just something to think about. If massive amounts of energy can open portals, it's possible, honestly, this goes along with the theory of how Asterin was able to portal during the yielding. Then maybe that's what happened to her when she took out half of Morath and how she ended up in Prythian with the way she sacrificed herself and the massive energy surge that she caused doing that. Another thing, when the Suriel was dying and Feyre asked him what its name was, it said, quote, does it matter? Which leaves the door open for us to maybe find out that it's a character that we know of from a different series later on.
Yep. I have heard that one.
Another thing, the Suriel is described as having, quote, the heart of a dreamer. And while Kaltain isn't specifically described as having one, she does believe in Selena, who, quote, dreams of the world being a better place. So that, again, kind of ties into the last thing that the Suriel said before it died, and Selena and everything. And then one last thing. In House of Flame and Shadow, there's a quote that says, then return to the mother. Oh, I'm messing this up. It says they return to the mother where they rest in joy with her until she finds another purpose for us, another life or another world to live in. So that quote is implying that the mother is kind of the one who's dictating all of this, and again leaves the door open for it to be possible that after you die, or not die, but die once.
Die part one.
Die part one. It's possible that you could then become someone else or something else, or go to a different world or something. Again, all of these loose connections. However, here are my points against it.
Wait, before you do that, I have one more point towards it, because I also did a little research on this subject. So you have blown my mind with a couple points because I didn't catch those. But we need to talk about the Suriel's gender, because that's a counterpoint a lot of people have. They say, oh, well, he's male. So I think that this is kind of an interesting thing. The gender was never technically named in the books. So if we think about all that happened to Kaltain by Parrington with, we can assume, sexual assault in many ways, I'm sure, it would make sense that... She was
assaulted by Vernon, too.
Yeah. It would make sense that, like, in her womanly body, if she was, blown apart and then ripped to Prythian, becoming the Suriel, it would make sense that she didn't want to necessarily claim, like, female gender. or any gender, I guess, because the Suriel kind of it's not named. So that could be a thing as well.
True. It's actually funny they bring that up because my very first part of my argument against this was the fact that I was like, I don't think it's ever specifically said, but I read online somewhere that the Suriel was a male character.
So I did add that to mine as well, because I said, well, I didn't actually do my homework here. I saw somebody else say that, but then someone else replied, well, they do describe the Suriel as a he. Now, I can't confirm because I am on vacation and did not bring the books and also did not deep dive into the interwebs. So take that with a grain of salt.
I didn't honestly look too much into that, but I didn't because I don't feel like I ever remember that being a thing reading the books. I remember it being like when they talked about the Suriel, it was like it.
Sure, yeah.
Like, you need to get it died, it told me this, it knew and I didn't. Like, I just feel like it never really assigned a gender to what it, so that
but
one
that's
to
a
me was like,
but such a, I felt like powerful statement too, if the Suriel is actually Kaltain, that she wouldn't want to be female anymore because of all that was like violated to her body, that she like just was like, never mind, none of it.
For sure. Or if like that last quote I said where they return the mother until the mother finds another purpose for them, another life or world to live in, unless the mother was like maybe even doing it. Kaltain had no part in it and the mother was being gracious in doing that. But all makes sense. That was just something, because I had seen it somewhere and I didn't remember and also didn't 100% fact check. I just wanted to throw it in here. But to me, that like, it's loose. Like, it's not anything really against it. I just wanted to mention it.
Also, point against, I think that it is implied that the Suriel is a species of creatures and not a single being.
Yep, that's my next point.
Yeah.
So Suriel that Feyre deals with is just one in a species, and it does say that. So while it's that doesn't necessarily mean Kaltain couldn't have become one. The fact that there are more of them to me makes it feel less likely that if she did, like, that all of this is like her and that it would had like a bigger purpose or anything.
Yeah.
Another thing against it is, while everyone hangs on to the fact that Feyre captured the Suriel twice with a cloak, I think people forget that is not the only way to capture
They
a
cut it
Suriel.
with chicken.
Yeah. You could have also
Did
used
Kaltain like chicken?
a dead chicken. And that's never specifically mentioned in Throne of Glass, that Kaltain is also really into dead chickens. So I think the cloak is just like what she ended up using. To me, because there was another way. It's not like, because that's what everyone holds on to with this. It's like, the Suriel's super into cloaks and Kaltain kept a piece of the cloak. It's like, okay, yes, she did use it, but it even specifically says in the book that it's not the only way to capture one. It's just she didn't have access to a dead chicken. She had a coat. And so that's what she just used both times. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
So
that's fair.
To me, that feels like a loophole. Again, another point against it. Even if she somehow opened the portal, outside of the mother theory, like, what kind of magic could have possibly changed her form? Like, the same, so, like, if we're going on the concept of Asterin, like, I don't believe it, but let's pretend that was true. She ripped a portal and then ended up in Prithian and, like, reinvented herself as Morrigan. She's still female. She's still a witch. She's, you know what I mean? Like, she's still the same. She's just reinvented herself in a different world. This would mean that Kaltain completely changed species, potentially gender or lost gender, became, like, older than she actually was, got all these this power that she didn't have before. And it just feels a lot more far-fetched if that ends up being, like, what happened versus just not dying and opening a portal and ending up in another world. Like, that I could get behind, but all the other changes that have to go with it, I'm like,
Well, and also, okay, so counterpoint to that argument to start, I feel like if Sarah wanted to, it's an easy write-in of, like, the magic, the sorcerer, we were able to change Feyre's species. based off of just magic. So I think you could do that. But I agree. I don't think that's likely. And also in line with the jumping through, the timeline doesn't match. And so if we assume that this is the same timeline in different worlds, for this jump to work, when Aelin falls, she sees pregnant Feyre in A Court of Silver Flames. Kaltain would have had to jump to Prythian during ACOTAR, where Feyre sees the Suriel for the first time, and that would have been really early in the story. Like, the timeline doesn't match.
Yeah, and I get into that in a little bit too. So 100% I agree that the timelines don't match up, because like you said, so that means during Kingdom of Ash, it's still like the middle of Silver Flames, because we find out that Feyre's pregnant like within the first third of the book, because that's kind of her like silent journey through, and then her and Rhys like just aren't mentioned much, but the baby is born before the end of that story. So I mean, yeah, she has to be pregnant for a little bit before all of that, and we don't know she's pregnant until A Court of Silver Flames. It's just kind of hinted that might happen in Frost and Starlight. So that means that like you said, Kaltain, her death would have had to line up with, honestly, before, well before, because like they even say this is like an old species, like they've been around forever, they know everything. Like, it's not even just that like she would have had to be there before. She, like, this, I guess, I don't know, the species could have been around instead of, like, that particular one. But regardless, she would have had to have jumped in there before Feyre was brought back to Prythian by Tamlin in, like, the first 10 chapters of the series.
Exactly.
And because she doesn't die until the end of Queen of Shadows, and we know that Empire Storms and Tower of Dawn are happening like at the exact same time, that means it's like technically right before Kingdom of Ash.
Yeah.
And there's just not there's not enough time.
Now,
like, that does not line up.
If you subscribe to the same world, different timelines theory,
yes,
she could have just been ripped from this timeline into a later timeline, but before Prythian by about 500 years or so, and then just grown with the world.
If that ends up being true, then there's a lot of things that I'm like, as of right now, there's no way. But if we later on find out that's true, then I could subscribe to those theories. But everyone online keeps saying that Sarah has confirmed that they are all happening at the same time, just in different worlds. But no one can cite the source. Everyone's like, I've seen an interview, but I've never been able to see this
and
original
then everybody's
source. So
second largest point is that, well, Aelin fell through all three worlds. She wouldn't have been able to do that if it was, the same world. We don't know that she fell through three worlds. She fell through what she thought were three worlds, but she could have been falling through three different timelines of the same world. We don't know. It's not necessarily confirmed or denied.
Well, and this is a fantasy book. Time could be like a lot more linear there than the way that it is here. So she could have, when she was locking up the word key, she could have fallen through time and worlds at the same time. You know what I mean? Like, she could have been falling through like dimensions, not just worlds. So to me, that's not enough proof that they're all happening. I mean, I don't know. I could see it being used as proof, but until Sarah writes it, that's not enough proof for me that
Sarah
everything's happening at the same time. Yeah,
she's got to write it, and then I'll be like, you know what, you're all right. I will make a public apology on this podcast, but until then, no.
Also, if anyone listening to this can send us the link to whatever interview it was that Sarah specifically said that all of these are happening at the same time, just different worlds, please do send it to us on Instagram.
My public apology might be a lot sooner than we all thought.
Well, that's the case. I'm not saying yes or no to anything. I'm just saying, like, people keep referencing that, but then when I've asked, like, where did you see this? They're like, I can't find the video anymore, but I saw it. I'm like, well, yeah. I'm not saying you're lying, but it's just like, when everyone is saying that, it's hard for me to believe that it actually exists because I haven't seen it. And that's it. But anyways, back to this. So another point against it. Everything Kaltain said to Dorian could also be explained as the afterlife. Again, like, okay, so this is where I did put in the, like, think bone quarter in Crescent City. Since at this point, that the conversation was happening with Dorian and Kaltain, the gods had not yet been destroyed. So to me, it could, wherever she was, could have been like how Gavin was waiting for Elena. It says in the afterlife. Also, like Connor in Crescent City, while Connor was in the Bone Quarter, he knew what was going on with everyone who was still alive. So if Kaltain was in like a similar place, it would make sense how she knew things. And it would also make sense why she says, like, I can't tell you, because the Underking or a god, like whoever, similar deity, would have prevented her from doing so. And also, Aelin spoke to Nehemia after summoning her with word marks, which Dorian summoned Kaltain with word marks also. And Nehemia says something similar to Aelin about knowing things and just being like, I can't tell you, and all that stuff. And also, I mean, she says, don't do this again. Kaltain doesn't specifically say that, but no one thinks Nehemia was the Suriel. So, and she pretty much, like, part of evidence of why people think that she is because of the things that she says to Dorian. So, I don't know. Yeah. To me, that there's all is easily explained another way. Yeah. Also, another point against this, do we really think that Sarah would make us all have the heartbreak of reading her death twice?
Yeah.
Well, like, it was a super impactful death in Throne of Glass, and it was a super sad death in ACOTAR, too. Yeah. Like, that's not... Do you think she would move her to another world just to have her be horribly and sadly killed all over again? Like, I don't know. To me, that doesn't seem like something she would do.
I am surprised, though, that Sarah killed off Kaltain with so many reveals all at once and then, like, didn't provide much of a backstory. Like, Kaltain had Shadowfire. That's, I think, a whole episode in itself. Why did she have Shadowfire? Who were her distant relatives? You know, what was her lineage? And then who, like, did her lineage die with her, or are there extended family members from there? Like, there's no backstory to that. And I feel like that was a really... Also, I put in my notes, we should talk about how powerful Kaltain is, because she was able to get rid of the Valg that was overtaking her on her own, without Irene, without a healer. Nobody else was able to do that. Only Kaltain. Yeah. And then she just, like, died. And I just feel like there's got to be more. So that I feel like it would be really cool if she didn't die and was actually in Prythian, but then reintroduced as, like, a new character or something. But I don't know if I subscribe to the Suriel thing, because I agree. Why would also the Suriel, if that was Kaltain, just die like that too? Like, we need more story.
I agree. And also, I think, to me, she set this all up to have it revealed later on that, like, who her lineage, like, who she could be related to, or, like we've brought up before, her power doesn't just die. It gets so, like, the fact that her Shadowfire was specifically mentioned and even talked about, and how similar it is to Nesta's power, like, I think it could be something where it's like later on we find out where Nesta gets her powers, and then Kaltain is specifically Kaltain, not like someone else, like is somehow brought back in, and they don't even know who she is, but us as the readers are like, oh my gosh, like that. I think
I live for those moments.
Like, her lineage and stuff, like, to me, that's more of why anything was even mentioned in Throne of Glass, for it to be just referenced later on. But you're right. I mean, she is so powerful. She is the only person that was able to defeat a Valg, and then just, like, for a while was just pretending that she hadn't also. The not just, like, actual power, but, like, the mental strength that she had to do all of that too, like, is unreal. So to me, that, if anything, just points to the impact that her sacrifice would have had, and how she was able to take down so much of Morath. But all that, like, or for her powers to then be brought up later on. That's more my thought process on why Sarah made her so powerful and even brought all that up. Another thing against it is specifically referencing the point I made for it about the Suriel bleeding black and Kaltain having a word key in her arm. I did not fact check this, so don't come at me. But I did read online somewhere that someone said it in Queen of Shadows, it specifically said that she was bleeding red when she cut out the word key.
I think I remembered that too, which is where I was like,
yeah.
But,
so it doesn't mean that it couldn't have imbued power within her somehow, but because she was bleeding red at the time she took it out, to me that makes it feel unlikely that it would have changed the blood to black and all that stuff. Yeah. Again, it's specifically referencing the point I made about Kaltain, or the Suriel being a dreamer and Aelin having like the dream of a better world. This is also something that Rhys talks about a lot, being a dreamer and dreaming of a better world. So it begs the question that it's not a specific link to Kaltain and the Suriel, but rather just a common theme that Sarah writes into all of her books. Instead of it being a point of reference on like how, like I said, that it could make a connection. So that's all I have for and against. I still lean towards her not being the Suriel. That's kind of where I landed. But I will say some of these points, when I was like looking into it, I was like, kind of reading it. So I wasn't like quite as against the idea as I was when I first started looking into this, but I still am not pro her being the Suriel.
That makes sense, and I am also not pro. So far, not pro Asterin being alive, not pro Kaltain. Well, I'm actually pro Kaltain being alive, but not the Suriel.
True.
I think there's so much more potential in her story, and it would not surprise me if Sarah wrote her back in.
I'm also not. Well, okay, let me take that back. I'm not pro her being the Suriel, but I'm also not pro her being alive because, again, just like Asterin, like her death meant something, and it was a huge turning point in the book. And Sarah already like doesn't kill off many people, and not that I want Kaltain or Asterin to be dead, but it just like the impact that deaths can have on a storyline make it so much better, especially when you don't want them to be dead. Like it just makes it more powerful. And so especially in the way both of these characters died, like big deaths and everything. So it's like for that to somehow come back that they didn't actually die and escaped would make me like roll my eyes almost. And I don't want
we have
to feel
also
that way.
look at the author. And unfortunately, that is a common theme with Miss SJM. She writes these big deaths in and then undoes them a lot. Undoes them. Yikes.
Usually, though, it happens quickly. So, like, with Amren and Rhys dying, like, within 5 pages, they were both back.
No, for sure. But it's just a common theme that she does. So we cannot be surprised if any of these deaths end up not being actual deaths. Although I would love to hear more about some of them. Okay, so third person, and I want to bring up a common theme here as well. Each one of these deaths that we think, they could come back, all have to do with a massive energy spike, like an explosion of some sort, where
that's so true.
They open a rift. Kaltain, big explosion. She could have opened a rift. Asterin, the yielding, could have opened a rift and escaped into another world. Same with the third person we're going to talk about, Cormac. So I think I've talked about this before on the podcast, but what better place to bring it up than the episode where we talk about the people who maybe aren't dead. We think Cormac might not really be dead. I'm pretty confident in this one, actually. So his death was super quick and uneventful in light of others who died in Crescent City, i.e. Danica and Liaba.
Yeah.
He literally could winnow and had shadow fire as a power. So, number one, we know that he was shot with was it a Gorsian bullet? Is that what they're called? Something like that.
I read Gorsian. I don't, but
sure. But it did not confirm that it was lodged in him. So if it was a clean wound out, he easily could have winnowed out of that. And so, I'm surprised that she wouldn't have like really specified that thing was lodged. He could not winnow. But because he has Shadowfire as a power, it seems like this death wasn't fitting for him, because it would kind of be like if Aelin were killed by fire. It don't work like that.
Yeah.
And so then number 3, I'm also convinced that the strange symbols tattooed on his bicep were word marks, because anytime these books mention strange symbols, we can pretty much assume at this point they are all word marks. We haven't found any other symbols other than word marks. And word marks, as we know, are kind of the link to transporting and opening rifts and opening portals. And so I think that when there was an explosion, he either winnowed to safety or, more likely, ripped a portal into somewhere such as Prythian. And so in A Court of Frost and Starlight, Morgan talks about seeing a shadow that she describes as familiar yet foreign. And so this is not something I've talked about in the past, but I saw a theory for this, and I thought it was wild and unhinged, but maybe true. So she sees the shadow, familiar yet foreign. Could this be Cormac hiding in his shadows? But moreover, could this familiar yet foreign be a hint towards a mating bond?
No.
Because a mating bond is like this, and that they are known to each other in a soul-to-soul way, even if they have never met. So, again, unhinged. We all know kind of Morgan's preferences. I doubt that that's going to be the case.
There's
I doubt
literally
she's going to write her like
way.
that.
There's no way she would have her coming out story in Akawar and then the next book
and then
secretly implant her male mate.
I know.
Like,
but
people would
it's a
riot.
theory that I saw, and it must be shared because that could be something. So then what I personally think is more likely, if that is Cormac, and I have mentioned this in the past, is that it could be a sign of familial ties. So a familiarity because they maybe share blood. And hear me out here. If Rune and Rhys are related, which I'm 99.9999% sure that is the case because of Bryce's statement when she sees Rhys, she says Rune. Moore is Rhys's cousin. Cormac is Rune's cousin. It could be a thing. They could be related. So
well, if they are related, then it's possible that Sarah would make them mates.
Melissa. So, changing gears entirely, what was significant about Cormac's death was that he self-sacrificed by causing an explosion that killed Pippa as well. That was kind of like the big plot twist, I guess.
Yeah.
But what if he actually did cause a rip in the worlds and was sent to Prythian, but not only him, but also Pippa through a portal? Because her death was very quick. And not to say Sarah hasn't been a fan of writing quick deaths. We can see that with Sabine. That was really surprising, and a couple others. But Pippa's was really quick, and we didn't get a lot of her storyline other than, oh, she's this big bad and she's evil. So could we see a potential Crescent City 4 enemies to lovers situation with Cormac and Pippa trying to find their way back? Ooh.
I don't personally subscribe to that thing. I will say I wouldn't be surprised if Pippa was also not dead. Because like you said, it was less even about just how fast it was and more about like how brushed under the rug all of it was. It was like, oh, there was an explosion, both of them are dead, and then like just kept going, like, and that's it for both of them. Like Cormac is mentioned again a few times, but like that's pretty much it for Pippa. Sabine's death was quick, but like it had been drawn out, like it was leading up to it. And I also think the actual death of her, like her death being quick, was more a testament to Ethan and his like turning into
power.
Prime and like power, and everything, and not as much about it being like, oh, this is fast and didn't mean anything. So I think her death was quick intentionally, and I also think that the Cormac and Pippa's quote unquote death was like being quick and slightly mentioned was intentional because they're not actually, like, I just think she tried to brush it under the rug really fast so that everyone just kind of accepts it and moves on, and then be like, but just kidding, because they're not dead. I also,
and then we've said this before, but Pollux also talks about them not finding a body, or they said like whatever remains of it or something like that, which means that they didn't see it. So that could be something.
And then also even more for me, like more evidence proving that there's a very like high chance that he is still alive. Not only, there's two things. So one, the conversation. He has a conversation with Bryce literally right before he goes into the lab. and talking about how he overheard her and Rune staging a coup and Bryce then being queen. And it's like, what is the point of that conversation? And him being like so adamant about supporting her if he was gonna die on like practically the next page. Like,
yes,
his
also
character. Go ahead.
Sorry. Bryce's star power shines every time he's near. We never got that explanation either. There has to be more.
That's
like,
what I'm
there
saying.
has
Like, his
to be.
character, he just played such a big role in like throughout this entire book, and honestly, like the grand scheme of things, for him to just not only die the way that he did by his own power, but also just like as like, oh, and then he died. But
Yeah.
again, even more so than that. So like the other thing for me, the only point of view that we get of Cormac's death, which happens, and this is all mentioned on page 766 of House of Sky and Breath, is from Therian, who, at this point, had already started running, and it specifically said he was half a mile away when he turns around and the building exploded, taking Cormac, the rest of the suits, and the rebels with it. So like I just mentioned, Therian was half a mile away. He also did not know Cormac super well at this point. He knew him the least out of that entire group. He's freaking Therian. Like, now, after reading House of Flame and Shadow, the boy can't do anything other than make mistakes or poor decisions. Like, so it would not surprise me if he didn't he thought he saw Cormac and then come to find out it wasn't Cormac or something.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, like the no body thing. Like, and also back to what you said about his tattoos being word marks. I know it says like there were Gorsian bullets involved, but I think I land on one, either the Gorsian bullet, like you said, going like clean through his shoulder so it didn't actually affect him, or there being Gorsian bullets involved, because I know it says he was shot multiple times, but he was also still able to use his abilities during this whole battle. So I think that means that he was either not shot with Gorsian bullets, and the fact that Gorsian bullets were mentioned was just kind of to throw us off, or they like went clean through, like you said, so that he still could use his powers.
Yeah.
But going back to the word marks thing, let's pretend that he actually was shot in it with a Gorsian bullet and it was embedded in him, so he couldn't actually use power. Then that I'll bet he knows so much about so many things. He knew too much about like word marks and powers and stuff like that to not have like an end game or a game plan. And I think that whatever the word marks were like, it could have been how he escaped. So like he knew he wasn't going to make it out. So like the word marks were a portal or something. Like the word marks on his tattoo were how he escaped versus his powers and being able to winnow and all that stuff. Like, I think there's perfectly logical explanations like for either his powers or even with him not having powers for how he could have gotten out of that. So
Yep. And to talk us out of it,
2 cents on
no
that.
notes. I have no notes to talk us out of this. I think that's 100% true. I think that he is going to come back, and
so
if
I'm
not,
smashing on this
plot
theory.
hole. Smash. I hate that, but I love it. All right, and here's
wait,
our
wait,
last.
Real quick, before we move on, I have 2 crack theories that kind of tie off Cormac that I want to talk about. So here's a crack theory. Sophie isn't dead either. Here's my thought process. They found, quote, her body, but they never fully removed the sheet to see her face. So Cormac only kisses her. He grabs her hand and kisses her hand. The sheet is never fully removed. It's just her hand.
Okay.
And also, in the beginning of House of Sky and Breath, when she freed her brother and the others from the equivalent of a concentration camp, it was said that she was, quote, tortured and they removed her fingernails. That would have happened literally right before she, quote, died. So don't you think if Cormac is kissing her hand, he would have been at least a little startled by the fact that her fingernails were gone, or it would have like some attention would have been brought to the fact that her hand didn't have any fingernails, and since no attention was brought to that, and the sheet was never moved, to me, it just is like Sarah maybe leaving a door for her Sophie not actually being dead either. Crack theory.
If I
that's
may,
like very loose,
if I may,
but it's just something I read online.
I'm sorry. I think I might not even be alone in this. Maybe I'm not that sorry, but I really hated Sophie and Emil's storyline. It was so unnecessary to the entire book. It easily could have been written in so many billion different ways with the existing characters to enrich the current story, but it was just such like a side quest situation, and it was weird, and I didn't love it. And I did think that she wasn't dead the entire time, and then for her to actually end up being dead,
exactly.
I was like, this is so whack. So if she's not dead, maybe I'll like that storyline a little more, but right now, I don't know.
I agree. I agree. It wasn't my favorite. I don't think I disliked it as much as you did, but I disliked the
Sophie
series
to me
in general
is
more than you.
Sorsha
So,
to you.
yeah. Hey, I get it. I'm not gonna try and convince you otherwise because she's not like my favorite. But
all right, give me your second crack theory.
Okay, I think you'll like this one more, but this one's even looser. Okay, so we know that Cormac had twin cousins in Avalon, and we know that Avalon is a place that is cloaked in mist-like shadows. So we also know that these twin cousins had, quote, mind-speaking abilities that can't be trusted. What if, because it was kind of dark and we didn't actually see
Dagdan and Branagh?
Yes.
Shut up.
What if they're actually Dagdan and Branagh, the nephew and niece of Morven, a.k.a. Cormac's dad, a.k.a. the King of Hybern? What? I'm just saying, what
Whoa.
if?
Wait.
Because we know both of them have backward ways of thinking as far as like how people should be treated. And
yes.
I know there's not slaves in Avalon, but the way he thinks women and like treating and all that stuff is not a far reach from how the King of Hybern, his whole reason for the war. That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
It's a
There's a
crack
lot
theory.
here. There's a lot.
It is a crack theory, but it would be so funny to me if this ends up being true.
Okay, but he died like twice then. Like he died. He died for real. And then he died again?
Wait, Morven didn't die.
Are you saying Cormac's dad is...
Yes.
Isn't Cormac's dad the King of Avalon?
Yeah, he doesn't die. His brother is Bryce's dad, and he dies.
Yeah, but they both die under the cave in the caves.
Morven didn't die in the cave. Remember?
No, clearly not.
He gave up. He gave up at the end.
But then I thought that they killed him. Okay, guys, I'm gonna have to come. I have to reread that 1,000-page book, and I'll come back.
Now I'm second guessing myself, but I know he didn't die in the cave. He makes it out of the cave.
But I thought that was kind of that, like, no mercy. And they thought they were going to show, like, we all thought she was going to show mercy. And then they ended up killing him.
That was her dad, not to Morven.
No.
Because
Morven.
He does not die in the cave. But I can't. Right. Now you're making me second guess if he dies.
We simply can't wait. Stall, everybody. Stall this whole thing while we find out. Or pause the episode. Is Morven dead?
I want to hear you talking out loud.
Deceased. Okay. Morven Donnell. That's Cormac's dad, right? Mostly Conrad.
I don't remember Cormac's last name.
I'm going to guess it's Donnell.
Deceased.
Uh-oh. It doesn't say.
That's what I'm saying.
No, it doesn't say on here.
But I don't remember him actually dying. I'm not saying it didn't happen, but I'm absolutely saying it didn't happen in the caves. And I don't remember it happening after the caves, which leads me to believe that he didn't die. Yeah, because remember, he's like, with the Asterin, he talks about how he is still going to be faithful, because that's like,
oh yeah.
He's like, I give them my word. I'm going to keep my word. Again, back with the backwards thinking and everything.
All right, well, this is just taking me to gigantic summaries, and I simply don't have the time. Don't they know we're on a live podcast? Okay. So we're just going to say, yeah, he didn't die. So, yeah, but then the king of Hybern died, so
well, yeah, I mean, I'm not saying he could, I don't know, he dies eventually.
Well, I guess to the point of this entire episode, everyone did die, but did
At
they?
some point.
I guess is the truth.
But
okay.
Was it die part 1, or was it?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, and so with that being said, hopefully maybe Zeke can edit some of that long waiting time out. Let's go into the fourth. The fourth person we think could have died but didn't. And just to make it abundantly clear to both you, Melissa, and the rest of the world, abundantly clear.
This is exactly my sentiment as well. Keep going.
I hate this theory. This sounds like terrible fanfic, and I do not agree. But in light of what we are doing today, I think it should be mentioned. Yes. I don't agree. I hate it. So we would need to assume that Rhys is the bad guy again. He is a terrible, manipulative male. And this theory is all about Ianthe being the one who didn't actually die, that Rhys would have saved her from the Weaver. And here's the gist of it. So Rhys and Ianthe would have concocted a plan to have him sire an all-powerful male with Feyre, and that male would be Nyx. And basically, Ianthe and Rhys would have worked together to manipulate Feyre to break the curse and then believe that there is a mating bond between Feyre and Rhys. So points to that is that if Rhys is actually a descendant of Maeve, being somewhat Vaug, he's actually evil. He would have been able to manipulate Feyre and believing that she had this mating bond with him. And Ianthe would have pushed this all along by, gathering the sisters to become Fae and basically pushing the Spring Court, everything, all of it to war and Feyre to be angry and all that. So Ianthe was painted as the villain intentionally to Feyre so that Rhys could swoop in and be more of a trusted hero. So like I said, I hate it. I don't want to talk about it. I don't believe it. And that is that. That is the whole episode.
Yeah. Boo. I don't like that one.
I know.
I just think there's no way. I don't think Sarah would ever make Rhys a villain in any aspect, but there's just no way she would make us think he's the villain, then make him the hero, to make it actually all of this be him. Just kidding. He actually is the villain. Especially after she says that her husband inspired the character.
Yeah.
No
well,
way.
That's been the argument for a lot of people. I also don't agree. Not so much because she wouldn't base it off of someone who's real to her. That's more important, I guess. I think that she wouldn't do it because you're going to paint him as the bad guy, then paint him as the good guy, then paint him as the bad guy again. It's double whiplash. And I feel like that would just be really hurtful to that's the reason we love these books is for Rhys. So to turn him around, I don't know. I think that would be a really bad mistake. 100%. And think of all the people that got tattoos of Rhys and things he said.
Well,
what a
remember
mess.
that one girl? Remember that?
Yeah,
I
the
saw this
Tamlin
online.
tattoo.
Yes, after just reading the first book. But no, I know I just can't let this one go. To me, if she knew this was going to be Endgame, or that she would eventually make him bad again, I think she just wouldn't have compared him to her husband. It would have been easier to just not say that, oh, he's my inspiration for this character. And then we would have just left it at that. There's no way on God's green earth I would ever write a book, compare the main male character to my husband, and then make him the ultimate villain. People would be concerned for me.
It's true.
I think her, honestly, she has a cult following, and I think her fans would do something to honestly call someone, legitimately be concerned for her well-being if that is who her husband is based off of, and he ends up being the ultimate villain in this entire series.
I know. Oh my gosh.
There's no way.
I mean, but at the same time, she could write it in so masterfully with just a double plot twist, basically, that he turned out to be manipulative this whole time. Well, and I have something to say on that. So recently we talked about the paragraph in the book where Feyre had seen a shadow, and then all of a sudden she couldn't control her fingers and ended up killing the wolf. And a lot of people were like, but that would make Rhys the bad guy in the end anyways, because he manipulated her and broke into her mind and made her shoot the wolf. And I want to clarify something real quick. that scene was not the original event of Feyre killing the wolf. That scene was a dream retrospectively.
Yeah.
Is that the word? Of her
It's a word.
dreaming about that event, and then Rhys is visiting her in her dreams. So he even talks about later on, I saw you in your dreams, all that. But a lot of people came at us like, but this couldn't be, because then he'd be evil. And so we're still good, guys. He's not evil yet. So continue on.
Oh, like in the future. I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't like that one. Not a fan.
I know.
I'm passing on that one also. So it looks like I'm only smashing the Cormac theory.
I hate that. All right, everybody.
Like half smashing the Moore one too, because I do think that she's a witch. It's just not Asterin.
All right, so we've got a pass, half smash, smash, and pass. And that is the final Hot Goss with Unpopular Sauce judging.
Yep.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah. If you don't already follow us on Instagram, go ahead and give us a follow at L.A.M.E Book Club Pod. If you listen on any sort of podcast format, if you could leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, that would help us a lot. Subscribe on YouTube. I think that's also at L.A.M.E Book Club Pod. I'm pretty sure I made that our handle for everything. And yeah, we will see you guys next week for another episode, and we will see you on Wednesday if you follow our book club episodes as well. This week we are jumping into part 2 of Queen of Shadows. It's going to be chapters 19 through 37. So see you then. Don't forget to listen on Wednesday.
Bye.
Bye.